I'm Mark Parker. I represent the 1st District on the Baltimore City Council. Sure. So I grew up in a neighborhood called Otterbein in South Baltimore, which has its own unique history, and grew up with 2 parents who were both in public service. My mom began as a nurse in the Army during Vietnam, and then transitioned to be a nurse at University of Maryland Hospital, and went all the way through, got her master's and her PhD in nursing at Maryland. And so grew up kind of like seeing her serve the community in that way. And my dad went to University of Maryland School of Law, and then spent most of his career as a public defender just down the street here at the Calvert Street Courthouse. And again, so every day they'd come back and they'd tell stories about how their work, their skills, their gifts, their time and energy were being spent to help our neighbors. Grew up in a church, Christ Lutheran Church, that took that really seriously, and kind of this is what like a Christian life is, a life of public service. It's a life lived where you're doing everything possible to take care of your neighbors and take care of your community. And I saw that both the individual people there, but also like our congregation as a whole was very dedicated to the city of Baltimore, had built a hospital, built senior housing projects, had created a program serving women and children, had created a homeless women and children, had created a preschool early childhood education. So I had a really strong sense that that this kind of like public engagement is what life is supposed to be about. So went to University of Maryland, went to seminary in Philadelphia to be a pastor, and came back to Baltimore to serve to a church that was getting ready to die, getting ready to close in Highland Sound, but was hoping to rebuild and reconnect with the community, and so came here to do that. But for me, the call has always been public service in Baltimore, whether that's what my parents did in healthcare or in the law, the justice system, whether that's what I do as a pastor, whether it's what you all do in community development work, which I had studied I had worked with CDCs in Baltimore in college, and was really excited about the work that it takes, the organized and strategic work it takes to rebuild communities. And so one of the things I love about being a pastor is I get to do all of those things, right? I get to support people in the judicial system. I had to take care of folks the best I can, get to be involved in community redevelopment, get to be involved in education. And always thought that if I stayed in a community in Baltimore long enough and had kind of demonstrated what I'm about, what my values are, what my drive is to serve the community, had earned the trust of my neighbors, that there might be an opportunity to serve in elected office. And so for me, this is an extension of that overall call to public service in Baltimore, and I'm really glad to be able to do it. There's no job description listed in the city charter for what this looks like. It's technically a part-time job, and the description is, here's 43,000 people and a dozen or so neighborhoods, do everything you can to take care of them. Great, I love that. I love having flexibility and freedom. And I love having people look to me to help solve problems, right? That's great. But then within that, there's requirements. I mean, city council meetings, we have 26 formal meetings a year. And then usually a few extras that come up for special circumstances, budget stuff or a crisis or a special committee of the whole hearing. I serve on 3 committees on the city council. Those committees meet, some of them meet once every 2 months, some of them meet 2 or 3 times a month. Some of them get really busy and then get slow, fine. But most of the legislative work happens there. So bills are introduced, we take them, we hear from experts, we talk to different agencies, we talk to each other, we ask questions, we make amendments, we improve it, hopefully. We vote it favorable and back to the city council as a whole, or we just say, we don't feel like this is going anywhere. But that's where the bulk of the work happens legislatively, to try to make sure that the laws of the city are helping people, are helping solve the problems that we have in the city, or helping the city grow in the ways we want it to grow. The other thing we do in committee hearings is oversight hearings. And so that's where there's not a piece of legislation in front of us, but we say, hey, listen, so right now we're in the middle of a multi-part series of oversight hearings about the opioid response here in the city of Baltimore. There's a bunch of new resources that we have in the city because of some lawsuits that we filed. And there's an entire process and a strategy built out to use those resources to help people who are experiencing addiction and communities that have suffered because of it. And so we are having a series of hearings where we're like, hey, the people in charge of this program come in. What's the data showing? Are we making improvements on these areas? How are we spending that money? What's effective? What's not effective? How can we make it better? So those are the kind of 2 things. In committees, we handle legislation and we handle oversight, right? And sometimes that's it's also like a crisis response, or like, we had a series of oversight hearings last year after several people in mental health crises were killed in encounters with police officers, right? And so we held a series of hearings to say, like, to fully explore that and say, like, what's breaking down, or what's happening here, what could have happened better, and what can we learn from other cities, what can we do legislatively to improve the way that the city handles mental health crisis response, right? First response in those situations. So that's all the stuff that happens inside City Hall. Um, I would say somewhere around 60 to 70% of the position isn't that, but is handling either one-off isolated problems that need to be solved for neighbors, mess up water bills, flooding issues, trash, public safety concerns, right, around a certain neighborhood or a certain place, senior housing, fair housing issues, anything where something isn't happening correctly, either because the government has failed in some way, or because people are doing things which are inappropriate, unethical, illegal, harmful to others, and neighbors say, "Hey, I need help to resolve the situation." So that's a huge chunk of the day-to-day. And so me and my staff, every single person on my staff handles constituent calls. We have one person it's their primary job, but all of us pitch in because it's too much for one person, and we all have some specialization in terms of what our backgrounds are. And then within that, there's a subsection of kind of like persistent, big, long-term issues that can't be solved with a handful of emails or phone calls, but need maybe a few months of work with city agencies, with communities to resolve things. So,
what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll give an example. We had a bunch of challenges last year. We always have had, but it was my first year in office. So it came to me for the first time last year with pedestrian safety issues inside Patterson Park. So there are paved paths inside Patterson Park, which are not streets. They're not signed. They don't have stop signs. They don't have sidewalks. They don't have any. They're for pedestrians and cyclists and dogs and whatever else. But they look like streets, and so people drive through them all the time because we don't have gates. We have more than we used to. There's not, so people can just drive in, and so and they speed, and people were like, there was just a bunch of dangerous situations that were taking place. Like, okay, and then that's inside the park. On the edge of the park, we have a lot of really busy streets: Patterson Park Avenue, Baltimore Street, Eastern Avenue in particular, where crossing into the park was hazardous because there's a lot of intersections. Sometimes we have stoplights and a full thing, but a lot of times it's just like a crosswalk that's like half washed out that nobody can see, and like every time you take a step forward, you're worried that someone's going to fly down Patterson Park Avenue and take you out. Right? So we worked with every single community association around the park and with Friends of Patterson Park, sat down just ourselves, walked through every single intersection, said what works, what doesn't, what's unsafe, what could make it better. Then invited the Department of Transportation in to the next full meeting. We put our plans together. They presented. They got feedback from the community. That then turned into a proposal that we all agreed to. And then we went to the budget cycle with the mayor's office. Said, Mayor Scott, we've done all this work together with the Department of Transportation, the community. These are our needs. This is about how much it's going to cost to fully implement this. I'm asking you to dedicate resources in this year's budget to help us get started. Right. So that's been like from the beginning of that process to now is probably like a 12 or 13 month process, right? And we still don't have, and we haven't started any of the build out yet. But that's the longer term stuff, right? So like it wasn't like a one-off thing, like, oh, this person has one issue at this intersection. It was like, no. We have these issues all over this area. We really need to improve safety. It aligns with the mayor's priorities and the Department of Transportation's priorities. How can we work to like push this forward? The zip codes in my district, almost the entire district, is in 21224. And that's a zip code that also extends out to the county. So if you live in the county, you don't live in my district. But 75, 80, 85% of the people in my district live in 21224. 21231 is the handful of communities and neighborhoods west of Patterson Park. So parts of Butchers Hill, Fells Prospect, or Fells Point, and Fells Point itself. That's 21231. And then the neighborhoods, so from west to east, the boundaries are tricky. The southern boundary is simple. It's the Patapsco River. Great. If you hit water, you're at the edge of the district. The east boundary is simple. It's the city-county line, which is kind of an imaginary line that cuts through people's houses and yards in Dundalk.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like the line between the city and the county along Dundalk Avenue, essentially, is on the east side. The west side is really simple. It's Bond Street in Fells Point, right? The northern boundary starts at Eastern Avenue, and then it jumps up to Baltimore Street, and then it jumps all the way up to Monument Street, and then it jumps back down to Eastern Avenue and out to the city-county line. So my northern boundary zigs and zags a bit. Neighborhoods, Fells Point, Fells Prospect, Upper Fells Point, Butchers Hill, Patterson Park, Highlandtown, Baltimore Highlands, Elwood Park, Brewers Hill, Canton, Greektown, Bayview, O'Donnell Heights, Broning Manor, Medford, Graceland Park, St. Helena. So from west to east, that's what we've got. Yeah. So the first district has by far, I think, twice as high, but by far the highest number of foreign-born people of any district in the city of Baltimore. And those are newer immigrants from the Caribbean, Central and South America. It's newer immigrants and refugees from Africa and from South and East Asia. And it's people who've been here for multiple decades at this point, but an earlier generation of immigrants from Poland, Greece, Italy, Ukraine. And so Southeast Baltimore has always been a place for a few reasons. One, there's always been pretty good access to jobs, especially to industrial and manufacturing jobs that didn't require a ton of education to perform, and that maybe not even super high language skills, so very accessible to immigrants and refugees. So access to jobs, close to the water, good transportation. It's a really dense community. It's close to downtown. It's a good place to live for walkability or for public transit access. And the housing in general over the years has been relatively affordable. And so for all those reasons, we've continued to attract wave after wave of immigrants. My block, just on my side of my block, there's 10 houses. We speak 4 different languages, like native languages, Italian, Greek, English, and Spanish. Right? So that's lovely. It really is. And people are really, whether it's through religious organizations, churches, and other things, and community festivals, whether it's through people starting businesses and sharing their background, their culture, their food, especially up and down our neighborhoods. It's a place where people don't just live together, but like are actively sharing their culture and their pride and learning with each other and building community together. You can see that in the festivals in Patterson Park or in our different neighborhoods, the Greek festival, the Polish festival, the Ukrainian festival. Yeah, I mean, tons of Latino festivals, all kind of different kinds. So that's the greatest thing about the district. The largest portion of the Port of Baltimore that's in the city, we have a huge industrial zone. Some of that's port itself, so marine terminals, both publicly owned and privately owned marine terminals that are incredibly important for the economy of the entire region, have lots of great jobs, really drive a lot of commerce, and then a lot of warehouse and manufacturing that provide great jobs for folks. And so that's still true in Southeast Baltimore. I'd say about at least a third, if not 40% of the district of the land area is industrial and port. So these great, really dense, diverse neighborhoods, and then we have all these great jobs and a really strong economy that's taking place in Southeast Baltimore. The last 2 things I want to mention, we have really strong history. I mentioned some of that, but especially the oldest part of the city of Baltimore, which is Fells Point, which predates Baltimore City as a whole, is in the district. Amazing historic area, and just lots of pride in that and lots of ways to engage in the history of the city. We have 2 Main Street commercial districts in the district, in the first district, Highlandtown, which is also an arts and entertainment district, and Fells Point. So that's great. The last thing I'd say is we're also one of the best parts of the city for raising a family, and we have way more families and young people than a lot of other parts of the city. So all of our schools are full, like completely full, which is really rare in the city of Baltimore. And that's after the 21st Century School Program renovated and expanded uh, 75% of the schools in the district. And so well, that's Patterson High School, which is just outside the district. We have two brand new schools over in O'Donnell Heights, on Graceland Park, O'Donnell Heights, and Hollywood Academy. John Rura in Greektown almost doubled in size. Highlandtown 237 almost doubled in size. Hampstead Hill expanded. But so it's a great place to raise families. We have great parks. We have great recreation opportunities. In general, our neighborhoods are really safe, and we have really strong schools. And so that's a big part of what we're about. Yeah, boundaries are always funky. I mentioned before. I have probably 75% of Fells Point, but then Jermaine Jones in the 12th district has the other 25%. I have half of Fells Prospect. Tony Glover has the other half. The same, and he has almost all of Upper Fells Point. I just have a little teeny bit. I have about half of Butcher's Hill. Councilperson Glover in the 13th has the other half. I have 25% of the Patterson Park neighborhood. I have the whole park itself, but only 25% of the neighborhood. Councilperson Glover has that. I have about 75% of Elwood Park. Councilperson Glover has the other 25%. And the rest of the boundaries are pretty clean. I have all of Highlandtown. I have, I messed up before. I mentioned Bayview. Bayview's not in the Bayview used to be in the district, is not in the district. My line goes along Eastern Avenue there. So the Bayview community, sorry, Councilperson McCrae in the 2nd district, she has all that. She has the hospital and she has the neighborhood. Yep. So the Southeast CDC and I have worked really close together since I came to Highlandtown to serve as a pastor back in 2009. So do a lot of work with them. I serve on the board of directors. I'm their secretary on the board. I chair their housing committee. We're in the middle of redoing our strategic plan. I really loved our last one. I was part of the creation of that, and that's where we started doing a lot more housing work and community development work in Baltimore Highlands and in Elwood Park and McElderry Park. So it's been really exciting to see that happen. That's the strongest CDC. Both of our main streets kind of function in similar ways. So Fells Point Main Street's an independent organization, work really closely with them. Highlandtown Main Street is part of Southeast CDC. And then just outside the district, but an organization, Charm City Land Trust, is up in McElderry Park. They're connected with Amazing Grace Lutheran Church, which is one of my sister congregations, and so I've known them and worked with them for a long time. The Fells Point Residents Association, we have the Fells Prospect Association, we have the Butchers Hill Association, the Brewers Hill Association, the Highlandtown Association, Patterson Park Neighborhood Association, Canton Community Association, Greektown Neighbors, the O'Donnell Heights. O'Donnell Heights has a residence council because it's in the HAB, it's a Housing Authority Baltimore City thing, so there's a great residence council there. Graceland Park has a neighborhood association, and so does St. Helena. That's a great question. It really depends what people are interested in. Like city government in particular, we just had our city council meeting last night, and our next city council meeting isn't going to be till the 2nd week of September. So we'll still have our committee hearings in between, but it'll be a minute before the city council meets as a whole. Committee hearings in general are far more interesting because the public can testify, right? And it's very focused. It's about one bill, and we'll go in depth, and you'll hear from different experts and people who are impacted. You'll hear from other neighbors who care deeply and passionately about something. You hear from the city agencies who have something to say about it. So committee hearings, whether you come in person to City Hall or you can watch them all online, you can participate online. You can watch them. You can also participate online, ask your questions, testify, and all the rest. You can also testify in writing, and so you can send to the committee staff. You can send your testimony about this housing bill or this zoning bill or whatever the case may be. So Baltimore City maintains a website called Legistar, Legistar. So if you search Baltimore City Legistar, the full calendar of city council meetings and committee hearings shows up, and you click on any single one of them, and it'll tell you exactly what's on the agenda for that. And then going deeper, you can also read the bills that are before us, any amendments. You can read all the presentations that have been prepared by the different agencies about it. So that's a great way. Aside from that, things are a little quiet in the district. We saw First Thursday concerts in Canton Waterfront Park. We have concerts in Patterson Park on a lot of our Sundays upcoming. There's a brand new farmers market on Tuesdays, starting here in 19 minutes. Tuesdays in Patterson Park, and then we have the regular Saturday farmers market in Fells Point too. When people come to me and ask me that question about how to get involved in their community, first I want to ask people, what are they most excited about? What are they most interested in? What's the kind of change or the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve in their community or for themselves? And so that'll really shape it. There's programs in the community like the Intercambio program, which is designed to help English speakers and Spanish speakers spend time together, learning each other's languages, and hanging out together and building community together and building understanding and supporting each other. So there's opportunities to do that and some other ways to help people of different backgrounds and cultures interact and engage with each other. There's work like Southeast CDC and other organizations, and Charm City Land Trust, which is outside the district, but other organizations are main streets that all have volunteer opportunities and are ways to contribute in really practical ways to what's going on. There's right now plenty of opportunities to get involved in supporting our immigrant neighbors and our refugee neighbors as they are facing attack by the federal government. And so there's ways to help feed our neighbors. There's ways to volunteer in schools. There's ways to participate in ICE Watch activities like patrols in the community to keep an eye on and rapid respond to ICE activity attacking our families in our community. So there's ways to do that. There's tons of art opportunities, right? Creative Alliance, the Highlandtown Arts and Entertainment District, a lot of live music in Fells Point, and so there's opportunities for people to share their musical gifts. There's formal and informal ways to connect with the music community or the arts community in Southeast as an artist, as a musician, as a patron, whatever that looks like as a volunteer. All our schools, obviously, would love to have help. There's a lot of environmental-based organizations, whether they're picking up trash, they're planting trees. There's some really strong tree planting organizations, whether it's Friends of Patterson Park and other organizations that are doing that kind of work. There's ways to volunteer out, through scouting. We have some really strong scout programs. Youth sports, whether it's run by Rec and Parks or run by other organizations, Volo Sports, right? We have a ton of youth sports that have lots of volunteer coaching opportunities, right? And opportunities to be involved. The Baltimore Banners is this fantastic youth hockey program. Youth hockey, but really life coaching program for students from McElderry Park and Elwood Park in particular through the ice rink in Patterson Park. And I deliberately left community associations for last, not because they're not important, but oftentimes we default to, well, you live in a neighborhood, there's a community association, you can join their monthly or their quarterly meetings, you can serve on their board of directors. All of that's true, and that's great. And also, there are all these ways that are more kind of specific maybe to people's backgrounds or passions or skill set that allow them to contribute in all these different ways. In addition, kind of the general, everybody in this neighborhood is invited to show up, participate, learn, engage, advocate on behalf of their community. And so we have really active community associations, and those are great ways to be involved. We try to make it really easy for folks to be in touch with the office. The best way is by email. The second best way is by phone. Email, all city email addresses are really simple. It's first name, period, last name at baltimorecity.gov. So Mark.Parker at baltimorecity.gov. Our chief constituent affairs manager, constituent affairs person is Cindy Ibarra. And so that's CINDY.IBARRA at baltimorecity.gov. Adler Pruitt is our chief of staff, and Agatha So is our chief legislative person. So that's how to get in touch with us. Email's best. And then our phone number is 410-396-4821. 4821. And so regular business hours, you should be able to reach us. We'll certainly give a call back if you leave a message, but those are the two best ways.